If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like, as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that.
This is how one US Border Patrol officer received Haitian migrants crossing the Rio Grande, coming back with food to a camp they've set up in Texas.
Hey, you use your women? This is why your country because you use your women for this.
Well, seems that Trump's not the only one who thought that these people came from S-hole countries. Biden's Border Patrol talks the same way. You know, I owe all of those black Biden supporters an apology. This is so much different than Trump. It was exactly 4 months ago that President Biden gave Haitians so-called temporary protected status, or TPS, due to the various crises going on there, from the assassination of their president to the devastating earthquake they suffered just last month. Well, don't look now, but Biden decided to change his mind. Now, if you're a regular listener or follower of the black media, none of this came as a surprise to you. However, if you're one of the clowns, one of these Biden butt kissers who was holding out hope that maybe, just maybe, the impossible would become reality, well, this is probably something of a shock to you, though you're probably more surprised at the fact that your cable news black bootlicks like Joke Reed and Don Lemonade and others are really doing their best to not mention this at all, same way they didn't mention all of Biden's broken promises and lies during the first 9 months of his presidency. White supremacy maintains its control through deception. White supremacy is a con, but like all con games, you let the mark con himself. Now, this little conversation has been a very long time in coming, but it's one whose time has indeed come. So just so you have fair warning, this evening's address is going to be a rather hard one. Not hard in the sense of damaging, but hard in the sense of severe. There's some tough truths that are going to be aired here, but they don't call me Professor Black Truth for nothing. Those of us, the black people who came out of slavery in the United States, have had a schism of sorts that's been going on for 2 to 3 generations now, particularly with black migrants who have come in. Now, the black migrants happen to basically do something that their predecessors, like Arthur Schomburg and Stokely Carmichael and Dr. Joseph Ben-Jochannan, did not do. They made it a point to try to separate themselves from us any way that they could. Part of the problem happened to be that, of course, the white supremacists who run the government and control this country, they were cherry-picking migrants who would be most conducive to white supremacy's aims, which is to confuse the internal politics of this dissident black post-slave class. Like most immigrants, the Haitians bought into the lies that white power had told them when they got here, that they were special Negroes and better than the black people who built this country. Now, I'm not saying that all of them did this, but most of them did. And most all the Haitian migrants who came here eagerly played along with this lie, and they repeated it to us every chance they got. But they're getting a reality check now. Turns out their white supremacist benefactors never wanted them here to begin with, and they're not bashful about letting them know it. Up until now, these Haitians had been in Latin American countries, and there wasn't a big effort made to round them up and deport them. You want to know why? Because those Latin countries knew that the Haitians wouldn't be staying long, either by choice or by compulsion. And the few who tried to stay were racially harassed until they left of their own volition. By the way, why don't these Caribbean and African migrants tell their Latin American hosts how hardworking they are, and how much they respect the law, and they respect education, and how they're harder working than the mestizo natives? And then they can go ahead and try that in other countries where they've attempted to migrate. Why don't they ever talk that claptrap in Europe? You want to know why? Because the United States is the only place on the face of the planet where there was a class of black people who actually fought to create opportunities where they were instead of running somewhere else. That's the reason why they don't play that game outside the United States. Because we're the only ones, we create those opportunities here. They got opportunities in the United States they don't even have in their home countries, and they're supposed to be running the place, though you couldn't tell by looking. And rather than show gratitude For the opportunities we made possible that they couldn't have even in their own home countries, instead they spit in our faces and claim that somehow they are exceptional Negroes and they're certainly too good to be around us. Well, in that case, then, I see no reason to change that now. You're too good to be around us and you certainly don't need our support. Isn't it amazing how there's no immigrant blacks who have been running us into the ground lately? Especially not the last few weeks, but certainly the last 9 months, they've been watching the vice tightening. You take a look around this last week or so, though, these exceptional foreign Negroes ain't nowhere to be seen. Up until now, they were loud and proud with their disdain for us. Now everybody's saying, that wasn't me, that was those other migrants over there. Oh, that was my family member, certainly wasn't me. Okay, now all of a sudden, wasn't nobody talking trash about us anymore. And it speaks volumes that all this is happening not under President Trump, but under President Biden, who the white media probably told you was vice president to the first non-white president, Barack Obama, who was himself an immigrant. Border agents using their reins as whips against black people. Oh yeah, this stuff is happening now, and it's to show you that when it comes to black people, there is no such thing as Democrat or Republican. There is complete and thorough continuity of policy when it comes to black people, continuity of policy that crosses party lines. Now, we knew that the black migrants, they were telling themselves all sorts of feel-good nonsense that apparently the rules don't apply to them, and they're finding out exactly what rules apply to them. Oh yeah, did they think they were going to come up here and it was going to be Black Lives Matters and they would play the game of we'll go ahead and talk as if we identify with the black folks who are already here until we get our foot in the door and then we start spitting in their faces. That game has now run out. We gave every chance there is. At this point, ain't no more chances to give. All the foreign flag folks who thought that Barack Obama being a child of immigrants meant something, they're finding out the hard way exactly what it meant. Absolutely nothing. And they're probably wondering, where the hell are all of those foreign flag Negroes who are on cable TV? Where are the Joy Reids? And where are all of these people like Karine StPierre, White House spokeswoman? She hasn't said one solitary word about what's going on at the border, and she's not going to. Only thing that she said this entire freaking week was that she said R.I.P. to Michael K. Williams, and then she said somebody named Michaela Cole won an Emmy, and apparently she's given Michaela Cole a pat on the back. I'm sure Michael will appreciate that, whoever the hell that is. So, while Karine StPierre is basically giving a recap of the Emmys, meanwhile, her fellow Haitian brothers and sisters are catching hell on the border, but she ain't saying a word about it. Now, it's times like this, I'm sure the Haitians, especially those migrants who've been spitting on our faces, they're hoping that, we're going to say Black Lives Matters, and all of a sudden, my brother, we are all brothers, white supremacy attacks us all. Oh, it attacks us all now. Well, in that case, then, go ahead and remind your white supremacist benefactors how hard you work, remind them how you respect the law. Go ahead and tell them that you're harder working than us and that they shouldn't treat you like us because they should prefer you to us. Go ahead and do that because you were telling yourselves that somehow was a little hustle that was working. So don't stop running that playbook now. Keep doing it. I'm sure that the guys who are whipping you with their reins and who are rounding you up while you're screaming and yelling and crying and they don't give a damn, they're watching you and your babies getting hustled like so much cattle onto those planes and they don't give a damn. I'm sure they'll be moved if you tell them how industrious and hardworking you are. Go ahead and run that line of claptrap now. I'm sure they'll be receptive to it while they shovel you onto the plains. And another group of people who we ain't heard much from, all those black Biden supporters, where you at? You know, those clowns disappeared right after the election. Haven't heard hide nor hair from. Right after the election, Biden's record when it comes to all of those black supporters of his who were so stupid as to fall for a con that we warned them about years in advance. We told what was going to happen, and they're telling us, oh, Biden, he ain't going to break them promises because he knows what'll happen if he does. Man, he been breaking the promises in front of your face and telling you what he ain't going to do. And now he's having black folks at the border whipped by the police, and he's looking and going, well, y'all, I know you're not going to do anything about it. If you were dumb enough to vote for me, that means that you're stupid enough to let me get away with it. And he was absolutely right. Any black person dumb enough to vote for Biden, you're also cowardly, craven, and dumb enough to let him get away with it, and you will. You're damn sure not going to admit that you were wrong. All of those fraternity, sorority chumps and the chuckleheads and just the brain dead, this is the price of being stupid. The black media has been cataloging and documenting all of Biden's broken promises and the lies that he's told. The bastard hasn't even been in office a full year yet. Hell, he's still got another 3 months to go. And the Negroes who were cheerleading for him, they've been real quiet. Yeah, we're hearing a lot of silence from a lot of them. So we got the black immigrants who were quiet. We had the black cheerleaders for Biden, many of them being immigrants who were quiet. The black cable bootlicks refuse to acknowledge Biden's various lies and broken promises. They just pretend not to know about it. We're just not going to talk about it. Then came this Haitian migrant crisis, something so big, so egregious that the black bootlicks couldn't pretend not to know about it. They couldn't claim that they didn't know. So instead, they've been giving a tisk and the behavior of the border agents is so shocking. Oh, this is just terrible. That's all. And what about your black representatives in Congress? The Congressional Black, or rather Immigrant Caucus. Are they going to have a sit-in on the floor of the House? They're going to go ahead and pull that one? What are they going to do? We're going to have a sing-along on the stairs of the Capitol? Is that what we're going to do? What is the Congressional Black Caucus going to do? Not a damned thing. You want to know why? Because the people who come from these cultures, by and large, it's every man for himself. There's a reason why these countries happen to be in the shape that they're in. The esprit de corps, the group ethos, never actually developed. So they came here with the people who, however dysfunctional we may be because we're not in charge of our circumstances, nonetheless, they at least found people here who had a code, however fractured it may be. You go to these other places, ain't no damn code. Of any sort, not even the idea that they need one. That's the reason why so many of them wind up washing up on the fetid, putrid shores of the white media. They talk as if they don't know who's in the White House right now. Nobody wants to accuse or blame Biden by name. And I guess they figure if they just don't mention Biden and say, oh, well, man, Biden, you ain't no different than Trump. I guess they figure that the stench of what Biden's doing won't get off on them. Or maybe they figure that they're already so covered in filth and grime and feculent lies that at this point it doesn't matter. In for a penny, in for a pound. Yeah, they don't dare go ahead and speak against Biden publicly because they know that their job as the bootlicks, at least on the left, is to defend the left arm of white supremacy. They are no different and no better than a Larry Elder or Jesse Lee Peterson or a Candace Owens, political whores who are prostituting themselves to whomever they think will give them some pennies. It doesn't matter how much of a shellacking or a beating or a tongue lashing that Larry Elders takes from the white right. He ain't going to speak against them because he's depending on them for every crumb of his daily bread. And the same thing goes for the Joke Reeds and the Karine StPierres and all the rest of them. They're depending on the white left for every crumb of their daily bread. So you see that just as there's no difference between the white right and the white left, there's also no difference between the black bootlicks on the right and the black bootlicks on the left. They're all playing the same game, same hustle, because they all work for the same master. Karine StPierre, here she is. She's Haitian. Oh, she loves talking about, I'm Haitian American. I'm Haitian American. Yeah, you separate yourselves from us. Now you got your family members being separated literally. And she apparently feels that her job in the White House means more to her than the lives of her fellow Haitians. And who are these immigrants going to appeal to speak for them now? They've been abandoned by the very self-serving bootlicks who they thought were representing them. Oh, we got a Haitian in the White House. See, Haitians are high achievers, much higher than you lazy Negroes who are here. You have not achieved anything. Look at what we have done. Yeah, and your high-achieving Haitian spokeswoman, she ain't even thinking about you. She ain't saying a word about you, and she's not going to. And while we're on the subject of achievement, let's get one thing straight. I'm not going to tolerate any of these people who are going to talk to me about the Haitian Revolution. First of all, that was 200 years ago. Second of all, you didn't have a damn thing to do with that. Oh, we had some butthurt folks who came calling themselves bombing their way into my Twitter feed, talking about that Haiti defeated this country, defeated that country, and you people, it was you Negroes in the United States who failed black empowerment. You didn't defeat white supremacy here. This from people who migrated to this country because they didn't have a damn opportunity for themselves in their home country. Even as an underclass, we managed to force this nation to give opportunities to black folks. Here you are, you're the majority. Forget about the majority, you're the overwhelming number in the country. You're damn sure the government in your own home country, and you ain't got no opportunities for yourself in your own home country. You want to tell me again about who didn't fight? The Haitian Revolution, that was Jean-Jacques Dessalines' accomplishment. That was the black side of Toussaint Louverture's accomplishment. Not yours. You don't get to ride on that. And yes, your Haitian forefathers did win the war. But what goes unsaid, the part that you don't talk about, is that those same individuals turned around and promptly threw away the peace. They won the war and then lost the peace. They actually paid reparations to France. How the hell do you call yourself a man and you voluntarily pay your slave master reparations after you beat him, kick him out of the country, throw off your chains and say, I'm in charge? Then you go back on your hands and knees to your slave master and tell him, Massa, I owes you. I was wrong for what I did to use. But that's what Haiti did. Hey, come on. If you're going to sit here and talk about what you did regarding the Haitian Revolution, don't you think we ought to tell the whole story? Haiti paid reparations to France. These are not slavery reparations. These are slave master reparations. I'm sorry, Massa, of depriving you of your free labor. That sure was mean of me. Because that's what reparations are. Reparations are an apology. Reparations are an equivalent, a group apology for a wrong and atrocity that was committed. I have to make you whole again, at least financially, and because what I did was wrong. I should not have stopped being your slave. I should never have punished you for enslaving me, and hence I was wrong for that, so I must make you whole again for the money that I would have paid you. You call that freedom? Haiti paid reparations to France, not for 1 year, but for 120 plus years. I want you to think about that. They paid France reparations for over 120 years. They didn't stop paying until 1947. So Haiti had been paying France reparations up until after World War II. I want you to think about that. You got a number of people who called themselves talking grimy about us, and these were the people who were alive when that stuff was going on. There's a number of them who are probably still alive today talking grimy about us. And they were paying reparations to France. This is part of living memory. This isn't something for 200 years ago. Haiti was paying reparations to France up until 75 years ago. But that's what the Haitian Revolution did. We got to tell the whole story. Those white supremacist French complained that you inconvenienced them by freeing yourselves. And some of y'all were so silly you felt sorry for the little frogs and paid them millions because you felt guilty about freeing yourselves. Oh, by the way, you also notice the Haitians never talk about the island of Navassa. Navassa Island is, or rather was, part of Haiti. It's only about 35 miles southwest of it. It was Haitian territory, part of what they fought the French for and paid reparations for. Let's not leave that part out. But it's now U.S. territory. A U.S. businessman, not even a French businessman, not even the French government, not even the U.S. government, but just a mere white businessman walked right up to the Haitians, came to Navassa and said, "This is my land now." Snatched Haiti's little island right out from under them. Told you it belonged to a white man now. And by the way, these white Americans, this happened in 1857, over 150 years ago. So only a couple generations after the Haitian Revolution, you had some white man from the United States came up, took the island. The United States said, "We taking what we want." And yet I had some idiots trying to tell me about how the Haitians beat a lot of folk, including the United States. You damn sure weren't beating the U.S. in 1857 when they're sitting here just taking your real estate from you. And by the way, the U.S. has made the equivalent of billions of dollars off of that Navassa Island and still owns it to this very day. That is U.S. territory right off the coast of Haiti. And yet the Haitians, and we're talking about in 1857, so scared, so timid, they did not dare fight for their own land. And they don't dare fight for it today. So don't come up to me talking tough about, in Haiti, we fought. No, your forefathers fought. You don't get to lay claim to that, because if you're going to sit here and try to pretend as if you can lay claim to the fights that your forefathers won, then you're also going to have to take responsibility for the fights your forefathers lost and that you refuse to fight today. Forget about taking on the U.S. military. You couldn't even take on a white shop owner. Let's just call it like it is. So you can miss me with the tall tales about Haiti fighting white supremacy. That was a long time ago, and it wasn't you. And a lot's happened since the revolution, none of it good. While you're busy telling yourselves lies about how great your valor and courage is, the white supremacists own the place. They're taking what they want, and they're driving you out. And the worst part is the white supremacists ain't even got to be there to do it. While you got some people who got the nerve to be talking trash about us over here, if you got it cracking and popping where you're at, you notice how you don't see anybody beating a beeline to where you are for what you built, for the opportunities that you carved out of the world. What opportunities have you made for even your own children? I rest my case. These Caribbean and African migrants all use the same script. When it comes time for them to give their same predictable, sad, sorry tale, their little sob story, it's always the same script. There's 2 or 3 families who own everything and control everything, etc., etc. Well, if it's only 2 or 3 families who run everything, many of whom don't even live in Haiti, Jamaica, etc. You notice how they all got the same stories, like 2 or 3 families own everything. Many of them don't even reside in those countries. They only visit them every once in a while. It would seem to me that it's pretty simple to drive out these 2 or 3 families. Seems it's pretty simple to overthrow them, but 2 or 3 families, I imagine you've got more among your own ranks. And don't talk to me about the military. These guys ain't got... Somebody show me where the Haitians have stealth bombers. Somebody show me Haiti's much vaunted unmanned aerial vehicle squadrons. Somebody show me where the Haitians have got all these Bradley tanks. And in the United States, black folks are up against the single most sophisticated military the world's ever seen. The most violent surveillance state and the most sophisticated, technologically superior surveillance state the world's ever seen. And yet we fight these bastards. In 2020, we had the white supremacists on their knees, literally. They were on their knees in front of us. Ain't a single one of them 2 or 3 families in any of your countries who have ever been on their knees because of you. These little foreign flag folk running their mouths, you ain't had them white supremacists who control your lands on their knees for an instant. And you're claptrap about the military, just some guys with assault rifles. What the hell have you got? You got some guns too? And by the way, you may be able to arm a group of men and give them uniforms, but that doesn't give them morale. Don't believe me? Ask the Taliban. They understood that the Afghan army, they may not necessarily have liked the Taliban, but the Afghan military understood that they were being led by a bunch of corrupt bandits. And that right there meant the Taliban didn't have to destroy the Afghan army. They simply had to outlast them. Because the Afghan army didn't really want to fight for bandits. They didn't want to fight for a bunch of corrupt crooks who didn't even pay them and who were running off with what little money the country might have had. The Taliban understood that if you have an army being led by corrupt men who are told you must fight and die for the safety, security, and prosperity of a corrupt elite, that army, it ain't going to take much for them to just throw in the towel. And that's exactly what happened. Much of the Afghan army, they just basically deserted their post without a shot fired. Hugo Chavez understood that in Venezuela too. That's the reason why when he was temporarily inconvenienced by a temporary coup d'etat, it was the military who got him out because they remembered the white elite and they were like, well, hell, we ain't going to sit here and fight and die for these blancos, these white ruling corrupt elites. We ain't going to sit here and fight and die for them. So please don't tell me that the Haitian military has high morale and they've got high armament and highly skilled. Get out of here. Armies don't fight for empty leaders. And yeah, you are right if you say, well, the Haitian military, they are violent. Yes, cowards and thugs tend to be violent, but they're only tough until the people gang up on them. You let the folks decide to gang up on those bastards and they will flee. The problem here isn't a lack of numbers. It's not a lack of weapons. It is a lack of courage. It is a lack of character, which is the same thing. People get away with telling themselves lies, and then they go to other countries and tell themselves those same lies, and they can't understand when reality finally hits why it is that nobody feels compelled to feel sorry for them. Last year, we forced the thugs in blue to take a knee. Oh, they were all a bunch of tough guys until they saw how things could go horribly bad. Then all of a sudden they bowed down. We are a minority and shrinking in this country, and yet you have seen us accomplish things in this nation that these people from Haiti, the Caribbean, and Africa have never accomplished in their own lands, and they're not merely the majority, they're supposed to be the ones running things. But that goes along with the problem. A lot of migrants are embarrassed. They're embarrassed about the fact that when they fled the country of their birth and went somewhere else, they feel badly about the fact that they even had to leave. That's an expression of failure on their part. It's an expression of failure. They look at themselves and think, well, what would I think if somebody else fled their country as opposed to built it up? See, you can't in one breath wax poetic about how proud you are of your home country and about how great it is, and yet you're sitting in someone else's nation. If your country is the lick, why the hell aren't you there? If your country is where it's going on, why aren't you there? It would seem natural that you would be there and build it up. You know more about the place. You're supposed to have roots that run deep. Yeah, but as soon as you saw a better opportunity, that's where you went. That's why nobody wants to hear about how great the country you came from was. That's what you say to make yourself feel better about the fact that you ran, you fled. You got to tell yourself that so you can live with yourself. And you got to also run certain people in your new host country into the ground and say that you're better than them because you're hoping that people from the dominant society will hear you say that. They'll give you a pat on the head and that somehow that means you're on the team. It's official. That's what the game is. A lot of immigrants have guilt about the fact that their society failed, or at the very least, their society failed them. And rather than own up to that reality, they instead talk about the places that they fled to and how their home countries were better. First of all, it's a white media myth that black migrants are just running the boards and they're killing the game when it comes to financial success. Most black immigrants are struggling. Go to Florida, Miami in particular, and tell me how great the Haitians are doing there. And then afterwards, you can go ahead and go to California, take a look at that. Then when you're finished there, you can go to New York. You can go ahead and tell me how great the black migrants are doing there. These are white media fantasies, lies, which too many black immigrants have decided to play along with. But now reality, as always, is having the last word. You cannot name a single Caribbean or African enclave in the U.S. that is a bastion of black empowerment. Same way you cannot name any Caribbean or African nation that is a bastion of black empowerment. If you were not willing to fight for black empowerment in the nation of your birth, then it's a lie and a fraud if you pretend as if you're suddenly going to grow a spine just because you ran to the United States. All of the opportunities that these black migrants have enjoyed here in the U.S. are the ones that we created. Every law, every set aside, every whatever that they have had was a result of what we fought for because they weren't here to do it. And white people weren't fighting for it. It's everything that we did and that we made possible. The only successes that they have is when they flee to the U.S. and ride on the coattails of the opportunities that we created, be it in entertainment or government, academics, and then they pretend to be our spokespeople. Rihanna cannot name for you one worthwhile institution in Barbados. Nicki Minaj can't name one worthwhile institution in Trinidad. Zoe Saldana can't name for you one worthwhile institution wherever the hell she came from. Hell, they can't name any institutions that they built here in the U.S. I would love for some of these migrants to go ahead and tell us the great institutions that they built for themselves here in the U.S. since they're doing so well. Haitians getting thrown out, and it was done instantly. Notice how there was no need for any hearings or Senate committees. You notice how nobody had to call for any sort of commissions to look into. We need to have a study. What would be the impact of deporting all of these? How much would it cost? Nobody asked that at all. They just said, get them the hell out of here. Nobody's asking where all of those planes came from or how they were acquired. See, the kind of things that they pretend are big issues. Why, if we're going to be deporting all of these Hispanic migrants, where are the planes going? Do you know how much that would cost? Oh, that's prohibitively expensive. Where's the money going to come from? It's not like we've got a whole squadron of planes or boats sitting around. As soon as they saw some black folks on the border, they had those planes lickety-split. I've never seen a 737 fit under a bridge before, have you? They found the resources instantly to get all these Haitians out of there. Oh yeah, these same Haitians, I wonder if they would be offended being called African American now. A lot of them didn't think that they were black, they thought that they were Haitian. Well, you found out that you're black now, haven't you? Oh, you'd kill to be called African American now, wouldn't you? But nobody's asking where the planes came from on this one. There don't seem to be any bureaucratic problems now. Nobody wringing their hands about where's the money going to come from. Tens of thousands of people being flown out overnight. And nobody's asked where the money for all this is coming from. All of a sudden, the Republicans ain't concerned about the debt ceiling. All of a sudden, nobody's asking, well, fiscal responsibility. We have to be careful with the people's money. They said, hey, we're getting these Negroes out of here. We don't give a damn how much it costs. We'll break the bank. We'll go ahead and put this on the nation's credit card. Let the great-great-grandkids pay for this one. It's all worth it. They didn't care about, nobody was asking about where the resources were coming from. Nobody was asking about feasibility. What does that tell you about all the Latino immigrants who are coming over? All these illegal aliens coming from south of the border, what does that tell you? They've always had the resources. They can get them there in an instant if they want to. Hell, you had a bunch of Hispanic mayors leading the charge on this one. See, immigration is supposed to be their issue because immigration, they like the idea that immigration is code for Latino because it's a game of how many of us are you guys going to let in or honorary whiteness if we prove to ourselves we are loyal to the cause. Yeah, a lot of these foreign-born black folks, they're finding out that there's a white-brown alliance, but there's never been a black-brown alliance. Hell, you had NPR who did a little story about it. Now, this one's going to take a minute, about a few minutes to go through, but I want to break this one down because you have a whole bunch of those folk who apparently think that there's some sort of camaraderie or some sort of brotherhood among immigrants. Oh, we came out of a common experience. That's what the game that they like to play, that as immigrants, we understand each other. We come from foreign countries, etc., etc. We're more open-minded. Yeah, well, here's what the reality is.
Jacqueline, what do we know about how so many Haitians ended up arriving at the border so quickly? I mean, did they essentially get through Mexico somehow undetected?
Honestly, I don't think that it was quickly. First of all, we have to remember that a lot of these, if not the majority of these people, are individuals who were in other countries in Latin America. They were living in Chile, they were living in Brazil, where the situation turned. They were having a hard time making a living. And what they have told me when I spoke to them is a lot of them came to Mexico with the hope of being able to live in Mexico. But they've had a very difficult time getting work permits, finding jobs, even finding a place to live. And so this is a community that, operates through word of mouth. So people started saying, hey, Ciudad Acuña is open. This port is open.
You hear that? They started off going to places like Chile and Brazil. Yeah, because I'm sure that the Trump of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, I'm sure that he was only too glad to have all of these Haitians show up. And then what happened was they found out that, these Latin American countries, they ain't like the U.S. There were no black people. There were no descendants of American slaves or foundational black Americans who were creating opportunities there. There was no civil rights movement there. We weren't there to create opportunities for them. So what happened was they had to move along. It's funny to me. I find it amusing. They went to Mexico with the idea that they would stay in Mexico. The Mexicans didn't want them there. Oh, they were having trouble finding jobs, finding housing. No, it's not a matter of trouble finding it. They were being told, ain't none here for you. That's what was happening. They were being denied jobs, being denied housing, because there were no DAS FBA people who were there to create opportunities. We were not there historically. By the way, just out of curiosity, why didn't the Haitians just tell the Mexicans and the Brazilians, we are very hardworking. We are harder working than these black people you have here in Mexico or Brazil. We are harder working. We have better education. We are harder working. We obey the laws. I wonder why they didn't do that. I mean, after all, they're so hardworking and they're so valued, and hell, they can make any place they go to work. Why didn't they just go ahead and pull that old line out on the Mexican government and see how well it went? Oh, that's right, because we weren't there to make it where there would be any opportunities for them. And that's something that we need these black migrants to understand. Whether they want it to understand or not, whether they like it or not, your position that you've been able to get here in the U.S., sorry, but it wasn't the result of your own hard work, dent, and industry. What happened was white supremacy saw an opportunity to confuse and undermine and derange the internal politics of the dissident minority in this country, of black people who came out of slavery in this country. They saw an opportunity to undermine us by taking people who were either had antipathy towards us or who otherwise were not with the program, and we'll go ahead and lump them in with you and claim that they're part of you. And because we already had a culture of we don't draw distinctions between black people, because white supremacy in this country made it clear ain't no distinctions between none of you, we went with that same script with these black migrants who were not interested in what it was that we were doing. But they've been telling themselves that what they have is because they're so hardworking, etc., etc. And then you ask, well, gee, would you try that anywhere else? If it wasn't because of what we did for you, why don't you go ahead and take your own hard work, dent in industry, and all of your hard working and take it somewhere else, and let's see what the results are there, and then we'll both know what the truth is. Man, those Haitians didn't even try to stay in Chile, did not even try to stay in Brazil, didn't even try to stay in Mexico. They ain't fighting nothing, they ran. But let's continue with the NPR piece.
John, it's been reported that Mexican authorities are busing people away from the border. So what does that mean for the community of people that have gathered here?
Yeah, what's official is the governor of Coahuila has said that a flight's actually left with people back to Tapachula. That's in deep South Mexico, right on the border with Guatemala. And he's basically saying, if you want to be in our country, you've got to process your papers there. And he's also said that he's in talks with US authorities. So there's obviously coordination going on here between Mexico and the US. And that's something that's been happening for some time. Mexico's been stopping in Tapachula on that southern border, people getting out and getting through. My colleague was actually there just last week, and he said there's thousands of people, a lot of them from Haiti also, that are in Tapachula at the moment, and Mexican authorities have sort of got that city circled off in the south to try and prevent them getting further up.
Can I just say that Tapachula was brought up? Everyone I spoke to, every migrant, they raised the issue of Tapachula and that the difficulties that they face in Tapachula, which led them to Ciudad Acuña. That is how all of these Haitians have ended up there, because of what's been happening in Tapachula, on top of the difficulties of being able to get legal documents in Mexico.
So we got Tapachula, a city in the extreme south of Mexico, which happens to be a place where they say, well, if you want to talk to us about getting into Mexico, we're going to put you right on the border of Guatemala. We're going to put you damn near out of the country, and we'll talk about your status then, your legal status then. But the city is an armed camp, apparently. They got half the Mexican military that's on the southern border with Guatemala, and apparently most of them are in Tapachula. But it's amusing to me because of the fact that why is it that so many of them are going north in the first place? Well, because of Tapachula. Yeah, they figured out the Mexicans have made it very clear this is not the beginning of your immigration into Mexico. This is the end of the road. This is not the beginning of your path to Mexican citizenship. This is where it stops, and you ain't going no further than this. Oh, they've had so much trouble getting paperwork in Mexico. No, they haven't had trouble getting it. It's just been impossible to get it because the Mexicans won't give it to them. There is no amount of hard work and there's no amount of dent in industry and no amount of self-congratulatory palaver that you can offer them that's going to make it where the Mexicans look and say, yeah, we want some more black folks here. Oh, yeah, so much for the brotherhood of immigrants, huh? So from Brazil all the way up to the Texas border, The Haitians have encountered nothing but an unending parade of failure. I don't get it. They're so hardworking, certainly harder working than the lazy black folks in the United States. I mean, I don't understand what could have possibly gone wrong. But I am curious, now that the Haitians are being given state-paid-for plane flights back home. I guess putting them on a boat, the optics of that might have been a little bit too on the nose, so they're squeezing them into planes, which these days kind of feel like cattle cars. They kind of feel like slave ships, the way they got people squeezed in there. But I am curious, how are the Haitians reacting to having themselves put on those planes and being sent back home? I wonder how they feel about it. Let's see what NPR has to say.
Of the Haitians who have been flown home, are they returning with the message? What has that return been like? Because I don't know how a country like Haiti that is going through, the political turmoil, the natural disaster, the aftermath of that can absorb people being returned.
The returnees are angry. On the one hand, they're insisting that the border was open. They don't understand why they were detained. They're complaining about the conditions in detention. They are blaming the Haitian government for quote unquote signing deportation papers. To me, there's a lack of understanding that they crossed illegally, irregularly into the United States. They really are under the impression that what they did was sanctioned.
Now you hear that. I find it very interesting what she's saying. They don't know. Is the word getting to them? Well, they seem not to understand. Well, that's interesting because some other news outlets are saying that the Haitians are getting the message loud and clear.
Waiting outside an immigration office in Mexico City, these Haitian migrants have decided it's safer to ask to stay here rather than risk crossing the U.S. border.
I am hearing people are being deported to Haiti, and right now Haiti is very bad. They don't have a president. There are many things, so we can't go there. That's why I'm afraid, and I want to live here in Mexico.
There you have it. So it seems that the Haitians are getting the message whether the phone rings or not. And of course, that's the reason why you do these big, ugly displays, so that it gets lots of headlines and people actually see it. So imagine that. They're at a point now where their last ditch, their last hope is that the Mexicans are going to take them in, but we've already explained the situation that's going on there. So what happened was bums rushing the door didn't work, so the Haitians are very angry right now because it worked for these other groups, but it didn't work for them. It's amazing that they're claiming that the Haitian government betrayed them and the Haitian government signed deportation papers for them. No, it's just the Haitian government did not say, oh, don't send them back. We refuse to take them back. You can't claim that you have a right not to be deported from a place that you're not a citizen of. Only citizens can stay in a country without fear of being deported. Everyone else, you are only allowed there at the pleasure, or in this case, displeasure of that nation. What happens is, they've all heard about the refugee hustle. What you do is you go to the United States and say, I am afraid for my life. Kind of sounds like when the cops kill black people in this country, right? I was afraid for my life. That's the white supremacist get out of jail free card. Or get out of deportation free card. I'm scared for my life. I am terrified. I will be killed. I will die if I have to go back. I am terrified. Everybody does the exact same script. Yeah, see, it works for a lot of those Latin ones, but you see, it ain't working for the black ones. I am scared. They're like, well, you need to stay at home until you get over it. Go ahead and get yourself a teddy bear. You'll be all right. You'll get over that. Get yourself a security blanket. You'll be okay. That's what happens. And what they figured is they'll just come north as if they think that crossing a river, people are drowning. This is how you get into the United States. Very difficult. No, I can see why people are not streaming here. We have to go across the river. Couldn't they made it a little bit more convenient? Really? Do the Haitians actually think that's how you get into the United States? That apparently the way you get into the United States is you got to cross a river. That's how you get into the U.S. We could use roads, we could use planes, and we could use ports, but we figure, hey, if you really want to get into the U.S., go ahead and cross this river. It's kind of like a Japanese game show. That's how American citizenship is, like a Japanese game show. Cross this river, and if you don't drown, you get a green card. No, they know exactly what it is. And what they figure is they're going to come here, give their sob stories, say that they're scared for their life, and just keep saying that, I don't understand. Well, that's okay. Soon you'll be in Port-au-Prince, and it won't matter what you don't understand. That's what happened here. That is precisely what happened here. And all that little running game that they were doing, white supremacy pretended to play along with some of them, but when too many of them showed up, see, white supremacy only needed a few of them to try to confuse our internal politics, to give them some hand-picked Negroes that they could point to and say, why, here is a quote-unquote group of black people who, by the way, they pick and choose when they want to identify as black. But here's a group of quote-unquote black people who are doing well in the United States, and they're immigrants. So, whatever it is that these homegrown black people don't have, it's because of their own failing. Why we have a group of black people here who are doing well. It certainly isn't because white supremacy handed them anything, but these guys are doing well, and anything that you don't have is because of your own damn fault. I know it hurts for the black migrants to hear that, but that's what it was. Your presence in the United States was largely a political solution to a political problem. The problem happened to be, what do you do with these slaves who refuse to die off, they refuse to go away, and they refuse to stop undermining white supremacy here at home, weakening white supremacy here at home? They refuse to stop. They have a vibrant culture that is attractive to people all over the world, including white people. So you can't say that these people don't make anything or don't contribute anything. And yet we got to find a way to marginalize them. We got to find a way to strangle them out of existence, but do it in a way where we can blame them. Well, the only way you can do that is if you have some black folks who you can point to and say you're not doing it to. Otherwise, it's obvious that it's racial. Oh, I know. We'll bring in some black folks, just a few of them. Ain't gonna be a lot of them. We'll bring in a few of them. We'll go ahead and make sure that people, principally on the right, will point to these black migrants and say, look at how well they're doing. And the white people on the left are not going to contradict them on it or question them about it. And then what will happen is we can go ahead and continue strangling these black folks out of existence. And these black migrants, they'll be the last ones to go. Long as we don't let too many of them in, there won't be a problem. And then all of a sudden, the Haitians decided to bums rush the door, and the white folks said, oh, hell with this. We're closing the door. We don't give a damn what any of you think. Okay, the game is up. As far as black migration to the United States goes, that's what the game has been since the 60s. That's been the game of the last 2.5 generations now. You may not want to hear it, but the reason you don't want to hear it happens to be when people have bought into a lie, it's very difficult for them to divorce themselves from that lie, especially when that lie makes them feel good. But as soon as they left Haiti, they found out that whatever self-aggrandizing fictions they told themselves got crushed by the real world. They got run out of Chile. Let's not make any garbage about they were having trouble in these countries. They were being run out. They were being run out because the folks there made it clear ain't no more Negroes being allowed in here. And when they got to Mexico, things got even worse. By the way, you take a look at this picture. I mean, if a picture speaks 1,000 words, this picture should be called the Black-Brown Alliance. This is some guy with Mexican law enforcement who's chasing one of the Haitians. Oh yeah, the Mexicans have been rolling out the welcome wagon for the Haitians for a while now. Shout out to Nas Escobar helping supply this image. You got the Mexicans doing their own reenactment of George Floyd. You notice how you don't have any of the Latino Congress people or what have you advocating for their fellow migrants? Oh yeah, you'll have the Congressional Black Caucus who'll be advocating for Latinos all the live long day. Oh yeah, you'll have La Raza or you'll have the Congressional Latino Caucus or whatever talking about, the inhumanity, chasing people down like animals in the United States, but they don't say a word about what it is that they, Hispanic governments, do in their own countries regarding Haitian migrants.
Walking through the back roads of the city of Tapachula, a group of Haitian migrants is trying to avoid capture by Mexican authorities. Immigration agents in southern Mexico are under federal orders to prevent migrants from leaving the city.
Did you, get that? Mexican government has ordered the federales not to let any migrants leave the city. That's not a city, that's an open-air prison. But this is what's going on in Tapachula. That's the reason why I spent so much time with that NPR article. You want to know what's going on there, why they're not crazy about being in Tapachula? It's because the Mexicans are like, be our guest. In fact, permanent guest. You don't get to leave.
There's many migrants suffering. There's no housing and we don't have any money. The hotels are expensive and we have nothing. So we have to try to go on foot.
Having spotted a government agent, the group quickly scatters to hide in a nearby cornfield. Fear is written on everyone's faces.
So you got the Mexicans chasing the Haitians through cornfields. I mean, it'd be funny if it weren't so damn tragic. Of course, there's other images. You got the Mexicans looking just like their white counterparts up north, flashing lights into vans full of Haitian migrants. I guess they're looking and go, oh, this is what the gringos probably feel up north. I feel empowered. This is what they're doing, except they're doing this largely with black folks, and that's who they're going to put in front of the images. Never mind the fact there's plenty of Ecuadorians and Costa Ricans and Nicaraguans who are in the group, but it's the Haitians who they brought out all the stops, pulling out all the stops to make sure the Haitians don't go anywhere. Ain't got a damn thing to do with nationality, it's got everything to do with race. See, this is what happens when you decide that you're going to deny reality. You find out that the Latinos are actually for deportations and against them at the same time, and no one's calling them out on this. Because it's not about immigration, it's about promoting white supremacy. Another example of, as Neely Fuller put it, white supremacy taking both sides of the issue. And if the Haitians don't like it, they can always file a complaint with their embassy when they get back to Port-au-Prince. And what do the Haitians have to say about that? Well, according to the Washington Post, the Haitians are saying nobody told us we were going back to Haiti. Now, whether or not that's true is immaterial, but it does say a lot that you got the Haitians who are saying, nobody told us we were going back there. Because apparently, a few of them, as I posted on my Twitter feed, when they found out where they were, they started beating up the ICE agents, beating up the pilots. They were not happy to be home. There was one Haitian in particular who said if Biden continues with these deportations, he's no better than Trump. Now, that's amazing to me. He didn't say Biden is no better than Trump for doing this. He said if Biden continues doing it. So apparently, Mr. Bordes, or whatever the hell his name is, apparently he's willing to extend Biden a little bit of slack if Biden stops. You know, if you deport me once or twice, I'll let you off. I'll go ahead and charge that to the game. But if you do it 3 times, well, as far as I'm concerned, you're no better than Trump. Look at that. If Biden continues with these deportations, he's no better than Trump. Obviously, if this guy had listened to the black media, he would have already known that Biden was no different than Trump from the beginning. See, this you can tell the folks who get their news from Roly-Poly Martin and the Mark Lamont Shills and the Jackass Reeds, and they actually believe the crap that comes from Karine StPierre. Oh, they have a Haitian in the White House. Surely they would not lie to us. Surely they would. But you can tell the fools who get their news and views from the black bootlicks for the white media. They're always the last to know. But even so, as you can tell by this comment, this guy still ain't got it yet. So Biden, he can deport this guy 4 or 5 times and he'll probably sweep it under the rug. But if he does it too many times, then he's no better than Trump. It is amazing. You cannot survive this level of stupidity. You take a look at all the destruction that's gone on in Haiti. Gangs are in control of the place. The earthquakes knocked half the country down. Thousands dead. Tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, homeless. You got the president shot. It's freaking Mad Max out there. And yet, you wouldn't know it by the reaction of Biden's Department of Homeland Security. They sound just like the Trump guys. Destruction? What destruction? It ain't that bad. That's the reaction from Biden's Department of Homeland Security. Don't take my word for it. According to the Washington Post, Biden's DSH agency, they didn't comment on whether the Haitian deportees had been informed of their repatriations. So in other words, yeah, we tricked them. I mean, hell, they tricked black folks to get us over here. Why wouldn't they trick us to take us back? That's common sense right there. But they didn't comment on whether Haiti was safe enough for deportees either. Well, of course not. They don't give a damn. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas defended the deportation, saying the damage from the recent earthquake had been rather geographically limited, and that an analysis of the situation on the ground had determined that country conditions allowed for repatriation. Wasn't Biden the one who put in place the temporary protection status order because of all the destruction there? And what does his DHS say when too many Haitians showed up? Your country really ain't all that bad. The destruction from the earthquake, it's been geographically, it's rather limited when you think about it. And, we've determined that country conditions allowed for repatriation. You mean the conditions in Haiti? No, we mean the conditions in the U.S. Too many of you black folks showed up. As far as we're concerned, this means we got to repatriate you guys. It's the U.S.'s country conditions that the DHS is concerned about. So there you go. Biden's DHS, they don't give a damn about whether or not Haiti's safe enough to return anyone. They're lying about the destruction there. And no, they didn't tell the Haitians, you guys are getting shanghaied back to Port-au-Prince. Oh, you would think at this point that Karine StPierre would resign in disgust with the Biden White House. Now you have the U.S.'s special envoy to Haiti, Daniel Foote. He resigned in protest. This is a white man. He resigned in protest. And I consider the most telling part of his resignation letter to be, my policy recommendations have been ignored and dismissed when not edited to project a narrative different from my own. In other words, I told them what it was I think that we should do, and what they did was they decided to change what I said and misrepresent what I said to be what the administration wanted. The administration ignored what I said, and then they lied about what I told them. Oh, but you wouldn't know that if you look at what's coming out of the Biden White House. Why, you had no less than Jen Psaki herself. What she said was, I would note that Special Envoy Foote had ample opportunity to raise concerns about migration during his tenure. He never once did so. Now, that wasn't his purview. His purview was, of course, being the Special Envoy on the ground. His positions were and his views were put forward. They were valued. They were heard. Different policy decisions were made in some circumstances. Now, listen to that. I mean, hell, Donald Trump couldn't put that no better. What's her name? Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She couldn't put that no better. Oh, he had ample opportunity to raise concerns about migration. He never once did so. Then says, now that wasn't his purview. Oh, yeah, that wasn't his job. He wasn't supposed to be talking about concerns about migration. You know, that's really not his job. Of course, Psaki contradicts herself completely. In one breath, she says that he had ample opportunity to speak on the migration and he didn't say anything. And then in the very next sentence, she says his positions were and his views were put forward. They were valued. They were heard. Different policy decisions were made in some circumstances. Well, both of those things can't be true. It can't be that he didn't say anything and then we heard what he had to say. He put forward what he had to say and we went in a different direction. Both of those can't be true, but that's what she's saying. So here you are caught in a lie. You know what? All those Biden butt kissers, they can't even come out and defend Biden on this one. I'm sure he wouldn't lie to us. I mean, okay, all the other lies that he's told, but I'm sure that this one's different. He wouldn't lie about this. He wouldn't send Jen Psaki out to lie about this. Your special envoy to Haiti, he has nothing whatsoever to say about Haitian migration, even though he's sending you a letter saying I'm resigning because of the whole Haitian migration issue. This is what's coming out of the Biden White House. Again, how is this any different than Trump? How is this any different? How is it any better? Yep. The white-generated lie of black migrant exceptionalism is dying a very hard, ugly death right now. Oh, white supremacy's torturing that little lie to death because they want to put an end to the idea altogether. This is a matter of, okay, all that stuff we were saying about all those black migrants being okay, scratch that. That's what they're doing now. And they're making a big, ugly show of it. This is how they intend to put people on notice. Don't come to the United States. They didn't do this to all those other migrants. You can have people coming from Cuba. That's okay. You can have Koreans being smuggled into California. That's okay. You can have Russians up in New York. That's okay. You can have 100,000 Latinos breaking into the United States through the southern border on a monthly basis. That's okay. We ain't doing nothing about that. But the black ones show up, woohoo, call out the National Guard, full court press, and tell those airlines we're going to be hijacking some of y'all's planes to get these Negroes out of here. In closing, I'm going to say this. There's no such thing as a failed state. A state is nothing more than a piece of land that somebody claims sovereignty over. And sovereignty basically means that within these boundaries, what we say goes. States don't fail. People do. There's a failure to build your state, or there's a failure to keep someone else from taking it over, one or the other. Failed state is nothing more than white weasel words, and by using them, you never actually say who has failed. You cannot claim to be so hardworking when you refuse to lift a finger to change your own home country. You cannot brag about how hard your forefathers fought when your complete and thorough acquiescence to a bunch of thugs and cowards shows that you ain't got one drop of your ancestors' courage. Nobody gives a damn about empty rhetoric. All they care about are results. And you can see the results from where it is that black people choose to go and where it is they ain't going. And ain't nobody going to Haiti. You don't see anybody bums rushing Jamaica or Trinidad and Tobago. You don't see them going to any of those places. You see them coming here because of what we did, what we built, the doors we kicked open, the path we made, and the bricks we laid. Now, to the black migrants hearing this, as you understand now that white supremacy has now had enough of humoring you. They've had enough of that. They're showing, okay, we can go ahead and turn off the spigot anytime we get ready, and we're turning it off when too many black folks show up. They're establishing that as a principle. When do they do a full court press? When does the border get slammed shut? When too many black folks show up. So what comes next for the black migrants? Something that should have come first for them. Black empowerment begins with you. Build where you are. Stop running and start fighting. That's the only way you're going to be getting any respect or being able to get the ability to see the next day. The days of running off to the U.S. and then spitting in the faces of the people who made it possible, those days are over now. The strategy of depending on what other people fought for, what other black folks fought for in the U.S., and then turning around and slapping them in the face and telling them that you're better than them, that day's come to an end now. You've always talked about how hard working you are. Great. You can start by working to stand up those countries where you came from. And this is a good thing. Black folks need to be able to separate the real from the phony, the producers from the pretenders. That's what's called for now. And there's been a lot of folks out there just faking it till they make it. Yeah, but you ain't making it, though. That's the problem. So all of those people who have been beating their chest about how great it is, the islands that they come from, the Caribbean, great. Now you have an opportunity to show how great they can become. You can build it with your own two hands. And all of the excuses that have been made about how you don't want to have to take on the gangs and you don't want to have to take on the corrupt politicians, that mess ain't hitting on nothing. We live in the most violent white supremacist stronghold on the face of the planet. Nobody can claim to have it as tough as we have it. Nobody can claim to be up against a more violent, organized force than we are. And how is it that we were able to get done the things that we were able to do? The main reason have to be is we were willing to fight for it. But the problem happens to be white supremacy saw a way to sow dissension among our ranks, to sow disorder and dysfunction. And what's happening now is we're starting to clean house. It's time to get the house in order. And that's excellent advice for all of these migrants who've been coming here. The black migrants, immigrants who've been coming here, that's good advice for you. Whatever it is that you were running from in your home country, the second that white supremacy starts going in heavy, you've already shown you're not going to stand. And we've made it clear we're making our stand here. The FBA DAS family who built this country, we have made up our minds. We're making our stand here. We're not running anywhere. And if somebody says that they basically came here because things were tough where they came from, first thing comes to my mind is, well, hell, when the going gets tough here, or when the white powers that be stop throwing you a couple of token crumbs, you'll be running away all over again. So that's the reason why you can't be depending on these guys. Their very first act coming here was to desert where they were. And if you can't fight for the land that you were born in, it becomes a question of you're going to fight for the place that you went to? Oh, they're fighting for economic opportunities. Well, what happens when the white supremacists who you've been repeating the lines of and helping to give moral support to and repeating their propaganda, what happens when they decide that it's time to pull the plug on what few opportunities they gave you? Then what? You have as few opportunities here as you had in the place where you came from. No, we're going to have to start getting black folks back on the track of build where you are. Because you're going to have to do it sooner or later. Whatever forces of dysfunction and ruin are in the places that you came from, sooner or later you're going to have to face them down. Somebody's going to have to do it. Oh, but somebody else needs to do it. Yes, same way that somebody else needs to take the lynchings and the shootings and the draggings and the burnings of the churches and the fire bombings and all the rest of it. Somebody else needs to do that too, so that we could have people like Candace Owens come here. We can have and tell black folks what they ain't doing. And we can have people like Roly Poly Martin come here and be cursing and hollering to beat the band. And we can have clowns like Jackass Reed pretending to be a white liberal as she wags her finger at black people, calling herself reprimanding us because she thinks she knows everything. This is not going to work. But what will work is black folks, wherever they are in this world, building where they are. Stop running, start fighting. Oh, but people are going to get killed and such. You can get killed right here in the United States. The only difference is you will have gotten killed trying to build up something for white supremacy. You build something in Haiti, you actually got something built for black folks. If you got a few families who are running the place, then it seems like it's time for some regime change. You're not going to play the game of, oh, we are up against guys with guns. You're not up against guys who are running around with stealth bombers, who are running around with unmanned aerial vehicles, guys who are running around with the most sophisticated weaponry in the world. And the U.S. damn sure ain't giving it to them. That's not what you're up against. You're up against a government of bandits and a few bandits on the road. But there is absolutely nothing going on out there that the people organized cannot crush. Bandits are not heroic. There are a lot of things, but they ain't heroic. They're not courageous. That's why they're bandits. And in every single case where a corrupt government has been confronted, you don't see the great leaders trying to make some heroic last stand. They usually are on the first thing smoking out of town, and they decide they're going to become a leader in exile somewhere with all the money that they pilfered. So I'm not going to be hearing any of the phony talk about we're scared. Or the talk, I'm afraid for my life. Why aren't you afraid for your children's lives and your children's futures? Why aren't you afraid that the bad guys are going to remain in control and power forever? That should be what you're afraid of. That should be what you're scared of. People stop talking about fear and start talking about power, things are going to change. And that being the case, we're going to insist upon it. You want to know why? Because that's how empowerment works. You got to be able to and willing to make the sacrifices that power demands. On the other hand, if your real desire is to be a cog in the wheel of white supremacy or whatever machine is going to make it where you ain't got to stand up and do the heavy lifting, you can always try that. But as you're finding out, you will only be a guest of whomever your chosen benefactor is, and they can always yank up the welcome mat whenever they get ready. Too many black folks who have come here as migrants, they've decided that they were going to dance with the devil of white supremacy, and now they're finding out the reality in terms that they can't dismiss or try to excuse away. The lesson to be learned here is that when you decide that you're going to be a tool of white supremacy, in the end, white supremacy always breaks its tools.